Hi, everybody. Devon Hexx here. And giving this Q&A a try, I'm recording with my Zoom because could not get OBS sorted. The video was blurry, the sound was all jacked up. So we're doing this with Zoom. And yeah, I'm Devon. I did show my face on that book club event that I was in for the kind of author Q&A, but turned out nobody really wanted to come into the video chat. I ended up answering questions to people in the general chat. So I thought I would go ahead and put my face out there this way, I guess. So yeah, Saturday night here and had a handful of questions that we're going to go through. And then we may talk a little bit about what's going on in the book world and kind of some things I want to accomplish in the next month or so. If you pay attention to updates on Patreon, because that's where I do, like, I'm on Facebook, but only have like I think less than 30 people, and several of those are other authors. So I have it because Facebook is good for advertising, and there's a bunch of harem lit groups. But to be honest, I'm way more interactive on Patreon with everybody. So um, these comments or these questions all came in through the post. So we're just going to go down the list. Let's see here. So first question, actually, we'll start from the bottom up. This was from Dave on Patreon. And he says, he says, I see other authors put up like the first chapter or something close to an introduction, usually on Facebook or Instagram, then link to Amazon. What are your thoughts? I mean, I think that's great, I suppose. When I started this, when I got book one up on Royal Road, I botched it completely. I released only, I think, like a couple of chapters at first, and it was one chapter a week for a long time because I was really terrified of uh, writing, not being able to keep up with release schedules. So I was very slow in releasing new content, and that probably hurt my success on the platform quite a bit. Luckily, I was still able to find an audience. I had a couple of shout outs. Now, sort of the larger question of free, like as you know, on the Patreon, once things go up on Royal Road, I make it free for any member. I think on Patreon, the first five chapters are for book two, especially are open to anybody who visits. I don't think you have to be a member just to read the first five chapters, but I'm not sure at that at the moment. Um, so try to stay on topic here. I tend to ramble a bit, as you can tell if you read my stuff. But Instagram, I don't know what happens on like Bookstagram and Book Talk. Harem Lit is really not represented in those spaces at all. I found Royal Guard Publishing, they have an Instagram account, but it's been inactive for about a year. They haven't updated anything since 2024. One guy popped up in my scrolling of Instagram. He's a Harem Lit author. I've never heard of him. I've never read any of his stuff. He seems to do really heavy anime style. At least looking at his artwork and sort of the plots of some of his books, he seems to lean really hard into the Japanese manga style of harem lit, which I don't really read. Um, but as far as me putting my stuff, like if I thought it would gain traction there, I'm not against it. Uh, and with Facebook, again, if there was a desire to see the first opening chapters, I have no problem with it. As far as putting a book out there for free, I've heard pros and cons of that. There's the general feeling among several of the authors in the Discord community, for example, who feel like if someone sees that a book is available for free, that they'll just avoid it because they figure it's free, so it's probably not going to be very good. But however, FG Smith, who wrote FG, sorry, I'm blanking on your name, on your books, Royal Blooded. I read the first two books of his Royal Blooded series, which is pretty good. So I recommend that. But he had his books up for free on Amazon in the early days. I don't know that he's doing that with his newer releases, but he seems to have had a good experience. But then other authors said, no, he shouldn't do that because it gives the impression of poor quality. I haven't tried it. I didn't, besides putting it up on Literotica and Royal Road and also Scribble Hub, but that died a quick and ignoble death. I had success there, so I have no problem with putting it out there for free in the early days. But again, eventually, I would like to make money from this, which I'm doing better than I ever expected. So but for right now, yeah, the books go up for free, and I hope that answers that question. Um, so let's see who else we got here. Code Words. Shout out to this guy. He was a trooper on Rural Road. He commented on every post. He's very super supportive of the work, and actually left him a comment the other day. He had to drop his Patreon membership because he just, he's focusing on other things. But I said, oh, it's good to see him show up in the comments because he was there for almost every chapter release on Rural Road. He came over to Patreon, so he's a good dude. He's asking my favorite book, which that's a tough question. If I go to books that I've read multiple times, one is The Count of Monte Cristo, um, which if you've ever seen the original, not the abridged, it's a massive, massive book. It drags quite a bit. This is back in the days when authors were paid per word. It was serialized, and the longer you could stretch it out, it was published in like newspapers and things at the time. The more you got paid, there's speculation that he had a team of ghostwriters working for stuff, putting out content for him as Alexander Dumas, right? But I think it's the perfect revenge story. Now, it gets a little bit sort of cheesy towards the end. Um, and there's this whole, like, if you watch the Jim Caviezel movie that came out in the early 2000s, that was the movie that got me to read the book. I thought the movie did a pretty good job. So I said, well, let me read the book, and picked up the book, and the book is so different. I mean, the structure is there in the movie, but the revenge that Dantes enacts is so much more layered and stretches out over decades, really. So in that sense, it's way more satisfying, but you do have to get through parts of the book that do drag a bit. There's a whole like romantic subplot between some people that it feels like, okay, let's move it along here, folks. But other than that, that's probably one of my favorites. I reread that about once a year, give or take. And maybe that's why I decided to write such a big ass book. I don't know. Because it's a beast of a book. It's, I think the last physical copy that I had was over 700 or 800 pages. But it's been a while. I lost that copy years ago. Fantasy books, sci-fi books. Ender's Game was a big influence on me as a kid. I have some issues with the author. He went a little bit off the rails in his later years, but that's another book that I revisit quite a lot. Um, Hard sci-fi, Ender's Game. The movie, eh. I can take or leave the movie, but I revisit the books quite a bit. It's a series. I didn't like the later parts of it, and then he went back and he started writing novels from perspectives of other characters, and never really got into those. But Ender's Game, this sequel to that, the direct sequel, Speaker for the Dead, and Xenocide. Those were books that were very influential to me, especially as a kid. I found that in eighth grade, picked it up over a Christmas holiday in eighth grade, read it in like 3 days, cried at the end, So, um, and another author I really like quite a bit is Peter F. Hamilton. He also writes epic sci-fi. Fallen Dragon, one of my favorite books, and I wouldn't say it's related to what I did, but the way that the main character and Fallen Dragon, sort of the thing that's driving him uh in in the story did sort of influence how I crafted the journey of Mitchell, Alora, Lethelin, and for those of you who are into book 2 at this point, who haven't got to that, the next character that comes into play. At this point in the Patreon release schedule, you guys have not met the third love interest yet, so no spoilers. But she's coming very soon. I think I released up to chapter 17 this weekend. What is the date today? That's a good question. It is the 15th. So yeah, I'm recording a Saturday night, November 15th. But I definitely sort of the way that the character behaves in Fallen Dragon, and the thing that pushes him and drives him on, and the resolution of that story, that definitely played a part in what I did with Throne. And he wrote another epic sci-fi series. It's called the Commonwealth Saga. It's big sci-fi. That is hard and big and expansive sci-fi. So if you like that sort of thing and you've not heard of Peter F. Hamilton, definitely check him out. Fantasy stuff, of course. Wheel of Time. I have a love-hate relationship with Wheel of Time, but I can't deny that it is very good. Um, for what it is, the flaws in it are as great as the triumphs, in my opinion. That book, that series, I should say, I get into about 7 or 8, and I start becoming a misogynist. Like Peter or Robert Jordan, he did not handle the relationship dynamic between men and women very well at all, and it's sort of ironic because if you've been in fantasy long enough and you're aware of how fantasy used to be written, there was a real problem with women in those stories and how they were portrayed. And a really interesting one to read is Robert Heinlein. If you've not familiar with Heinlein, the women in his stories are studies in contradiction. Like they are strong and fiercely intelligent and driven, but then they go all gooey and submissive and like and it's weird. Um, but with Jordan, the way that he wrote the women in the story and the Wheel of Time, they are so infuriating. It seems like whenever they're around the male characters in the story, their only job is to henpeck them and berate them and nag them and drive them crazy. But then when they're on their own stories, they're great. They're fleshed out characters. They're capable. There's not a stupid one in the bunch as far as like directly. Nynaeve, fuck Nynaeve all the way off. Hate that bitch. But other than that, everybody else was great in the story. It's just when he would try to write the dynamic between like Rand and Matt and Perrin and then the women in the story, it drove me mad how he did that. And oh my God, the braid tugging. I think the only reason I was able to finish that series is because Sanderson picked up where after he died. So yeah, I would say those are big books. I read a lot of Eddings as a kid, although I haven't revisited it. A couple of years ago, I went back into the audiobooks for some of his books, and I name dropped those characters. A lot of you have caught those. This is my way to pay homage to the artists and the writers and the IPs that have sort of influenced me over the years, as I drop their names in or town names or things like that. So yeah, there's that one. We had a sort of a comment more from Gilchrist. He's talking about Vrass. Now, Vrass, if you followed my rambling posts on Patreon, Vrass was almost didn't make it into the story. I was very conflicted in the beginning about whether or not I wanted to have an annual companion. Um, and I wasn't sure that I was going to include him in the story almost until the chapter showed up where I was like, okay, this is where I would insert him. And the problem I had once I had him in there is I had built him up so much in my head that he was a little bit OP. And I kind of worried about like there are specific choices I made in the story that needed to be made because you can't drop someone like Rivos, who is a very powerful mage, in the middle of this sort of hero's journey because he throws every encounter out of balance. Um, it's like being a bodyguard for a kindergartner, like when all the other bullies are kindergarten. He just destroys everything that they would come across at their, if you think about it in gaming terms, at their level. Alora is a higher level, of course, than Mitchell, but I can't throw the world at them on the first chapter because he has to build up. He has to be given that chance to grow. And so Vrass presented after I kind of got into him, I got a little carried away. And as I got into writing him, because he's a fun character to write for, giving him that personality and thinking of, okay, first off, cats are assholes. They just are. I mean, they're cute and they're funny. And some of my favorite things, like if I'm scrolling Instagram, I always stop for the funny cat videos. But at the end of the day, they're kind of assholes. Um, so I'm thinking, okay, here's this fairly intelligent cat who perceives the world completely different. Um, and what would be his concerns? Well, he wants to eat. He is bred to hunt. That is his driving force, is to hunt, to kill, to rend. And I sort of built that into his design, as it were, that they were created by the Fae as to be sort of companion hunters. And the Fae, the way I sort of did that, they're a little bit inspired by Peter F. Hamilton's Commonwealth saga. There are an alien race in that series that are a little bit like they are basically humanity's idea of Fae. And so the way that the Fae sort of behave is a little bit inspired from the Dresden Files, but I took some liberties with it. And with Vrass, the Fae, they go through stages where they just want to fuck some shit up. They want to be ridiculous and they want to go on these terrible adventures, and they wanted killing machines to play with. So they designed Shadowcats, Gratha, which is not a ripoff of D&D, because it's not, because I say, because this is why. Um, but anyway, so that's just a little bit of backstory of Vrass's my thought process that went into him. And Gilchrist says that imagined him less thin than that. I'm not sure. I've sort of described him as sort of like a tiger, so I'm not sure where the thin idea. Maybe that's something where he read into something that I didn't intend. But Vrass is in book two. He's got his own sort of mission that we're going to revisit from time to time. And those of you who are caught up on the story, um, as I've released it to Patreon so far and coming soon to Royal Road, if anybody visits this later on, he has something he needs to do. And I've been sort of cagey with that. I do like to give a hint, and sharp-eyed readers would have, if you think back to the early interactions between Mitchell, Allura, and Vrass, um, there is a hint of what Vrass is running off and doing. So I like putting these things in here. A great, and I'll tell you where this comes from. A great YA novel that I wrote. Honestly, it's one of the best books I've ever read ever. It's called When You Reach Me by Rebecca Stead. I read it. I'm an English teacher in Korea, and we did this for a novel class. And the story is so beautifully put together. Rebecca Stead weaves these sort of, I don't even know if they're strong enough to be called foreshadowing, because it's not presented in a foreshadow. It's just something that she puts in the story, and then it seems random, but you find out by the end of the book, none of it was random at all. So intentionally, I do things like that in the story where it's a little thing that I drop here, or um, and it's just like, well, it's just he just said the thing. I mean, there is, of course, some of that. I don't control every single word as I type it, but there are specific elements that I put in. It's kind of a Chekhov's gun thing. It's not there on accident. Um, I mean that to be there. A couple of you caught it. You've caught a few of them here and there. Someone would leave comments in book one about, oh, I bet that's going to happen later. Oh, what would this mean? Why would you do that? Wink, wink. And so Vrass has a similar thing that he's off doing, which will show up because I'm splitting book two into two parts. Um, we won't get the full story of what Vrass is off doing by the end of book two, but you are going to get snippets. He's going to get some POVs, at least two chapters over the next 20 or 30 or so until book two is finished are going to be specifically for what Vrass is getting up to and kind of what he's driving at. So that's him. He's a lot of fun. He's a little OP, but he was a big hit. Code Words especially loves Vrass. So I like how that turned out. Safi, my second editor that I should be paying. I should be paying you because he checks everything. Um, he's got Discord, and Discord is something like I should make a Discord. I did create the Discord room, and at the time, this was last year, I think. I posted up on Patreon if anybody would be interested. I did a poll, and only a few people were actually would care enough to show up. So if the book really takes off and I start getting a lot of people, I'd probably end up just paying someone to manage the Discord, because Discord moderation and all the plugins, I could do it if I sat around and really struggled through it. But the more I looked into what it would take to moderate a Discord sub and to make sure that bad things didn't happen, the more I was like, no. So a couple of people offered some help, but when I looked at how many people responded to the survey, it really wasn't worth it. When it comes down to it, if I get very popular enough to justify my own Discord community, um, I'll probably just hire someone to do that. And because it's not that I just have all this money to throw around, but it's again, I'm a working guy. I have a job. I teach. Maybe one day I'll make enough from writing that I don't need to teach, but I do enjoy it. Um, but I will farm out things like my cover art. I paid for that twice, unfortunately. Um, and with Discord, it's just one of those things that's like, is the value there for me to sit down for the weekend and really dig down and figure out how this works and make sure it's set up right. And I'll just give somebody here's $100, you go do it, or whatever they charge. I don't know. Um, and let's see, the last question we got on the post, I believe, was more just a general thing about Royal Road and Literotica from Galais. He's asking when it's going to go to Royal Road. This is a more, time sensitive question because by the time a lot of people watch this, maybe it'll already be up on Royal Road. But yeah, it is going to be as of this evening, the 15th of November, 2025. It's going to be up on Royal Road by the end of the week. I pre-approved the first chapter, so that way, when it's ready to post, it goes up immediately, and then I will pursue a much more aggressive posting schedule there. I'm trying to have the book done before Christmas, which I should be able to do, I believe. And just to kind of get into, so that's all the main questions. So I hope that satisfies that. And just in general, what I'm looking to do, again, I made a very long post about this last week on the Patreon, is I'm going to split the book. Instead of being a trilogy, it's going to be at least a quartet. I don't know if you call books quartets. And potentially 5 books. It really just depends. I have an outline. Like I basically have the main trilogy as it was supposed to be in my head, as far as what I want to happen. I haven't started outlining book 3 yet, but I know roughly what it needs to do, especially now that I'm splitting up book 2 into 2 parts. So with the new ending, because the original ending was not what the ending is going to be. And this is forcing me to sort of reevaluate how the book progresses. So the main structure of the story is going to remain the same, essentially, but the end is now not the end. The end is the setup for the final thing. And I don't know how many books I could probably do it in one book. Again, I haven't sat down to really dig into that because it's compared to the whole other story that's relatively new. I came up, or I shouldn't say I came up. I ran into a problem with the original ending. It wasn't hitting the right notes. It didn't have the payoff that I initially thought it was going to, and I realized that I had sort of set things up in a way that demanded more attention, I should say. Um, so I could have fit the original trilogy in 3 massive tomes with the final chapter, quote unquote, the final book. Probably I could do that in one book, but I haven't sat down to really dig into how I'm going to get from A to B to C. So there's that. And all of it, of course, will go up on Royal Road. It will go up on the Quivering Quill. I'm very, passionate about trying to support independent creators and independent. Again, I paid for art instead of going and just doing AI myself. Now, my artist used AI, but he used AI plus Photoshop and whatever tools he has, and I was okay with that. He told me up front, I do use AI. I was like, yeah, that's all right. And I know that's falling out of favor. A lot of people are just using AI, and I get it. The art was not cheap. But I feel like if I'm going to make a living or at least make some money in a creative field, I owe it to people who are also doing the same thing. It's sort of a give and take, I suppose. Putting my money where my mouth is, perhaps. I've railed against Amazon, and I actually had a thing with a guy, a friend of mine here in Korea, and he's like, "Oh, so you're giving into Amazon? Oh, and I was like, for right now, I kind of have to." He's like, "Oh, you're kind of a hypocrite." It's like, no, no. I mean, I do want to make money on the book. I'm not doing it just for the fun of it. I would never release it if it was just for myself. But for now, I have to bend the knee and accept Amazon, but that's only because at the moment they're the most profitable. But if people like me and other authors take a chance with sites like the Quivering Quill and other independent sites that publish ebooks and things like that, then hopefully in 3 or 5 years, it won't be Amazon or bust. If you disagree with Amazon or you don't want all your eggs in that basket, you have other choices. And I did pretty well on Quivering Quill. Um, and he's growing the site. He's working hard to bring in more authors and offer more features. So this is something I can really get behind. So the books are going to go up there first, but then because of KU, I do have to pull them down. Just basically what I'm doing now with book one. But that's the plan. So, as I said in the Patreon post last week, I want to have book one on, or book two, on Quivering Quill by January and let it sit there for about a month. And I noticed that with book one, all of my sales on Quivering Quill came in the first month. There were really very few that happened after that first 30 days. So I figure a month for right now is the sort of sweet spot for there. And then I'm going to put it up on Kindle for right now. The plan is book one is 6 months, and then I'm going to pull it off of Kindle. It'll still be on Amazon, but I want to be able to put book one back on Quivering Quill, and so it won't be free on Kindle Unlimited. I'll pull it out of the Kindle Unlimited program so I can release it out to wherever I want to, and yeah, that's what I plan to be doing. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say for that. And this has been fun. And I apologize for the headset. My mic, my actual physical mic was not working. It said that it wasn't being read by my USB. So I don't know what happened with that. So we got the headset. But thanks, guys. First time talking to you directly. For those of you on my Patreon, again, I've said it a lot, and I told you I'm going to keep saying it. Everybody who comes over takes time out of their day to sign up free, or if you want to give me a little bit of your money, it really does blow my mind that I have found the audience that I have and that you guys show up every week and you continue to support the Patreon and people are buying the books. It's not taking off quite like I wanted, but it's doing pretty well as far as that goes. I'm writing against the meta, which is always a challenge. I'm a new author. It's my first book. It's huge. Um, but I think I have a story that people are that they're identifying with, and I see comments all the time on Reddit. People that want these deeper stories, um, and I feel, I mean, this is biased naturally, but I feel like I'm finding the audience that is looking for that content slowly but surely. It's not going to be a huge bestseller. Maybe it'll be like that sort of slow creeping thing where word will start to get out. I've been putting off doing an Amazon ad. But you guys that have been here and the new people that come on, it 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 makes me emotional. It really does. Um, so thank you. And those of you who sent questions, thanks. This has been fun. I kind of feel like I'm talking to you guys directly. And of course, you guys can always talk to me on Patreon. I'm very responsive there. I try to respond. I don't always get like Patreon's kind of weird. Someone will comment on something, I'll comment on a post, and then I will reply. But then when they reply, Patreon doesn't send me an email that you replied to the original message. So I can miss if you guys have ever responded and asked me another question. I didn't get back to it. It's not that I was ignoring it. I probably didn't see it because I check my email pretty regularly. And the notification system on Patreon doesn't tell me when you respond. Like Safi replied to a comment just today, and I got an email for his his response, and but then when I went to Patreon, I couldn't find it. It wasn't showing up in my notifications, so I had to go through. I was like, which chapter did he first respond on? Okay, I had to go back and find his original comment, and then scroll through the replies. Ah, there it is, because it doesn't show me in Patreon where it was. So it lumps the notifications together sometimes, and then replies don't always come to my email. So it's hit or miss. So if you had asked me a question in a comment or a reply and I did get back to it, send me a message, ask me again. I'm not ignoring you. I just didn't see it. But all right, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up there. I look forward to you guys reading the rest of the book, and hopefully I justify your presence here. That you feel like you're getting a good good value for taking the time to sign up and all that. So thanks so much. And hopefully we do this again sometime because this is kind of fun. Bye, guys.